Keanu Reeves cautiously enters the room, noticing a mysterious man who slowly turned towards him. This man's name was Morpheus, and he was in the possession of the truth.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole.
That truth being, the reality you're living in is a simulation, the Matrix. Everything you know is a lie.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
As Morpheus was sitting right in front of him, he offered him two solutions.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
To that, Keanu responded with shit, let's pop some pills, y'all. Keanu took the red pill that Morpheus offered, and later on woke up to the reality that the said reality is a simulation.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
This was a sequence of scenes from the 1999 film The Matrix, but the story is actually much older than that. Approximately 24 centuries ago, the Chinese philosopher Zhuang Zhou dreamt of being a butterfly. The butterfly, being absolutely unaware of Zhuang Zhou's existence, just did what a butterfly would do, flying around, flapping its wings, living its natural life. And that felt like a lived experience. In that moment, that was the reality of being a butterfly. But upon awakening, Zhuang Zhou noticed that I am not a butterfly, I am Zhuang Zhou. So he started wondering, am I Zhuang Zhou dreaming of being a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming of being Zhuang Zhou? This is one of the early examples of someone questioning the validity of the reality surrounding them, as well as the reality of their own being. Centuries after Zhuang Zhou's butterfly dream, in the 17th century, a French philosopher, Rene Descartes, wrote Meditations on First Philosophy, which he starts with the position that absolutely everything his senses can observe can be doubted. For how can we trust the perceived reality if the senses that we observe this reality with can't be trusted? From a certain distance, some objects can seem smaller than they actually are. From certain angles, some objects can appear to be of different shape than they actually are. In that sense, Descartes has been deceived by his senses multiple times. So, why should we conclude that something is real because we experience it, because we perceive it? Furthermore, Descartes applied this not only to the external reality, but also to his own being. Well, he was certain that he had arms, fingers, hands, legs, that he was sitting in his chair. But, well, what if all of that was an illusion or a dream? Can the experience of having an arm that you can move also be an illusion? Can your senses be deceiving you here? That in fact, what I am doing right now, moving my hand across the screen here, isn't actually happening. I'm just being deceived by my own senses that that's what's taking place, when in reality, perhaps I don't even exist. But where does that deception of senses coming from? Well, According to Descartes, God wouldn't be the one to deceive him because God is all good and God will never do such a thing. Therefore, he must have been deceived by an evil spirit. An evil spirit is deceiving him and making him think that what his senses are perceiving, the external reality as well as the reality of his own being, is just an illusion caused by this evil spirit. And if that's so, then how can we be sure of anything? Even that I, in this moment, am existing. At its core, the story of Zhuang Zhou and Descartes are really the same story. The one that's concerned with the possibility that the epistemic validity of our reality is not to be trusted. Epistemic meaning that which relates to knowledge, coming from the word epistemology, the branch of philosophy that concerns itself with knowledge. What that includes is, what is knowledge? How do we acquire knowledge? Is knowledge possible? What's the difference between knowing and believing? Or even questions like, is it knowledge when we think we know something, or we're certain that we know something that didn't happen to be true? The geocentric view saw the Earth as the center of the universe. At that time, that will be considered knowledge. You know it, right? But we already know that that isn't the case. Did a people actually knew it? Or was it not a form of knowledge? Now, why is this relevant to the theme of this video? You see, if our reality didn't happen to be real, it is just an illusion, it is just a dream, or a simulation for that matter, then is knowledge really possible? Do we know anything about it if it isn't true, if it doesn't exist? As time went on, this thought experiment took new forms, and as technology was developing ever since the Industrial Revolution, the focus of this thought experiment was moving away from dream towards a technological illusion of sorts, as an illusion caused by technology or technological means. In the previous century, the philosopher Hillary Putnam took this Cartesian thought experiment and gave it this new form, inspired by emerging sci-fi horror stories like Frankenstein, and presented us with a new but still old scenario. This new yet old thought experiment was called Brain in a Vat. And what it's all about, you may ask. Imagine you are a brain. Forget your body, you're just brain. Some evil, mad scientist removed your brain from your body, right? Well, normally, in this type of scenario, you would be dead. You won't be experiencing any phenomenal, qualitative experiences of your mind. Once your brain is dead, your mind is gone. But here something else is happening. This evil, mad scientist removes your brain and places your brain in a vat filled with liquid that is sustaining your brain in a living form. Your brain is not rotting, it stays alive, submerged in this liquid. And your brain is being connected to a supercomputer. Supercomputer is sending signals to your brain through the cables that simulate electrical impulses that your brain normally receives and when it functions. All brain activity, it's there, right? And what that gives you is an illusion of everything that is happening. Well, in that scenario, of course, you don't have a body, and the external reality you're experiencing, it's all not real. Everything you are is a brain in a vat that thinks he has a body, that he has arms, legs, all of this and that, and as well as the couch I'm sitting on, this apartment I'm in, the reality outside my window, it's all not real. It's just a perceived illusion. And such electrical impulses that are artificially generated would be able to give me this sort of phenomenal experience. From there on, this thought experiment was starting getting more and more inspired by technology. Or what I would actually say is that technology opened the door for the new version of this thought experiment. Of course, someone living 20 centuries ago wouldn't be asking whether life is a simulation. Is my brain connected to a computer that is deceiving my senses? Of course not, because such concepts didn't exist at the point. But as technology is developing, we are developing those new thoughts. And as such, we started thinking, is life a simulation? And films like The Matrix only made such theories more popular. Or perhaps a different version of that same thought experiment is not necessarily whether life is a simulation, but also, is life a video game? What if we are all NPCs, non-playable characters, in a video game of sorts? So the question is, how can such thought experiments be solved? How can you disprove those claims? And in the case of a dream, it is much easier. Let's take a look at the butterfly dream, for example. Well, I think that if Zhuang Zhou was in fact a butterfly, he would have an identity and phenomenal qualia experience of being a butterfly extended in time. Our sense of self, who we are, doesn't last only throughout the duration of a dream, but rather is extended from the moment we become conscious to the moment we die or for some reason lose that consciousness. If Zhuang Zhou was in fact a butterfly, he would have this extended existence of being a butterfly. But I think it's safe to assume that if that was the case, then probably he would spend more time being a butterfly than being Zhuang Zhou. But we know that that is not true. We know that he spent more of his time being convinced that he is Zhuang Zhou than being convinced that he is a butterfly. Or, as I would put it, having the qualia of Zhuang Zhou than having qualia of a butterfly. Besides, let's entertain the theory that Zhuang Zhou is not Zhuang Zhou, but rather that Zhuang Zhou is a butterfly. If that was the case, then wouldn't the butterfly, if the butterfly would be able to ask such a question, be asking himself, am I a Zhuang Zhou dreaming of being a butterfly? And if so, wouldn't the butterfly have some sort of phenomenal experience of dreaming as being Zhuang Zhou? And considering the intellectual differences between a butterfly and a human, wouldn't this butterfly's intellect risen up during the duration of that dream and then fallen significantly? There is little reason to think that such a phenomenon would be possible for a butterfly, but perhaps in a dream such a phenomenon is possible for a human. Still, there is little reason to believe that Zhuang Zhou knows what it's like to be a butterfly, no more than I know what it's like to be a spider, just because I dreamt a couple of times of being a spider. All phenomenal experience you can really know and understand is that of your own. Another point is that there are testimonies of Zhuang Zhou dreaming of being a butterfly, but there's very little to no testimonies of a butterfly dreaming of being Zhuang Zhou. And completely besides point, but the epistemic value of testimonies is actually quite low. For instance, if you saw something happening, you can be more certain of that than if someone were to tell you, hey yo, have you seen that shit go down? Seeing the evidence for yourself has a higher epistemic value than hearing about it. Which means that, For all we know, everything we've been reading for our entire lives might be false, unless we have conducted some experiments ourselves to prove those things. But for some reason we are making the decision to trust those sources, even though they are, in fact, testimonies, just like the news, right? We trust the news. The news wouldn't lie to us, no, would they? Anyway, if me being me, living this life, was just a dream, then it probably would be very temporary. And yes, life is temporary as well. We are all going to die, but the long term of real life experience compared to a short term dream experience can't really be compared, especially when I have this extended identity in time that is developing throughout the years. In the case of Descartes, he argued that, well, if someone is experiencing those sensations, the thoughts, the dreams and ideas and feelings, then someone must be experiencing it. Meaning, well, he must exist. That's at least one thing he could be sure of, that if someone is experiencing it, that someone must exist. Therefore, you know, the famous quote by Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Which leads to Cartesian duality and, you know, God creating above the mind and the body as separate substances. You know, there's the matter and there's the phenomenal, the soul, the physical and the phenomenal, the duality between the two. And Descartes argued that, you know, that material reality must be real as well, since it was created by the God, and the God wouldn't deceive him. And I don't really want to go in depth on that in this video. If you want to, you can read the first Meditations on Philosophy by Descartes. I will definitely recommend reading that if you're interested. I will instead move on to what is relevant to this video. You know, what the whole brain in a vat experiment, or it's like a simulation, it's like a video game, what those thought experiments bring to this debate is that it doesn't really matter what you are experiencing phenomenally, or what sort of knowledge you have acquired through epistemic or scientific means. None of that really matters if life is a simulation, that all this information is fueled up by a supercomputer that is giving you those electric impulses. Then all of that is, well, not real. Therefore, you can't really know anything. If there is even the slightest possibility that life might be a simulation, then there is at least small reason to question the validity of our reality. And, you know, is it a bit stretched that it's just, you know, supercomputer feeding us wrong intel? Sure, yeah, it is far-fetched. Is it very likely that that is the case? Doubtful. But if there's even a slight chance that that might be the case, I think it is worth examining as a valid hypothesis. Oops. I think it is a valid argument coming from the availability of possibility. The way Putnam put it, the statement, I am a brain in the vat, is either false or it is meaningless. The statement is false if you didn't actually happen to be a brain in a vat. If the reality you're experiencing, you're living in, is in fact real, then, well, the statement is false. You're not a brain in the vat. But still, the statement, I am the brain in the vat, is absolutely meaningless if that happened to be the case. Why? Because if that is the case, you can't possibly know it, at least not with certainty. You're not really experiencing yourself as a brain in a vat, therefore going around saying, I am a brain in a vat, is a meaningless statement, because that is not how you understand your own being. That is not who you think you know you are. Even if what you actually are is a brain in a vat, you can't possibly possess the knowledge of yourself as a brain in a vat. You don't understand that reality outside of your own simulation. The way Neo wouldn't think of himself as the human being attached to that machine. Instead, he thinks of himself as the man living inside that reality, which happens to be a simulation. At this point, you might be asking yourself, well, why should it matter whether life is a simulation or not? Well, it still feels real to me. I'm still experiencing it, and that's the only reality I know. I'm just living my life, doing my thing, engaging in interesting and mundane activities, and you might even grow to care about this world, even if it happened to be simulated, or if it happened to be a dream. You might end up caring about people in this world. Is the love for your family, your friends, or your partner any less real just because it is inside a simulation? For you, as a normal person, what should it matter, really, right? It's relevant. I mean, nothing really stands in the way of you living your life just as you did before you even started thinking about life being a simulation. And from a purely practical reason, it doesn't really change anything, right? And you know what? I agree with you. But let's take a look at it from an epistemological perspective. The very common and popular position in epistemology is that in order to know something, that something must be either real or true. If it didn't happen to be true or real, then it is impossible knowing. Knowledge is not possible without the truth. In that sense, you might be asking yourself whether it is possible to know something in your dream. Now, imagine a scenario in which your partner is cheating on you, but in your dream. Your dream that your partner is cheating on you, and it may feel real to you.
Good morning, babe.
You're a pig.
What?
You know what you did.
No, I don't.
You cheated on me.
No, I didn't.
In my dream.
What do you want me to do? Go into your dream and beat myself up?
Yes.
But the reality of your partner cheating on you is contained only to that dream. It is not some true statement that your partner cheated on you because it happened in your dream. In that case, it would be foolish to go around saying, I know that my partner is cheating on you. I experienced it in my dream. I saw it with my own eyes. The truth is your partner is not cheating on you, so go easy on him, give him a massage or something. They probably did not deserve to get shit for that. It can be said that a simulation possesses certain similar or same properties as a dream, in the sense that what is happening in a dream is not true. In the same way, you could say that what is happening in a simulation is not true either. Therefore, we could ask ourselves if life we're living in and of itself is a simulation, and that would mean that everything we learn while being in a simulation is a simulation as well. In that case, the knowledge is a simulation. It is a simulated knowledge, therefore not true knowledge. So the point I really want to go with in this video is how can we acquire knowledge? How can we be certain of our knowledge if life can in fact be a simulation? And what I think is much harder to disprove is that life is a simulation. It will be like proving that God doesn't exist. I like the easy way out. Okay, that probably doesn't inspire much confidence in me, but I really think we shouldn't complicate our lives. And if the option A is much harder to disprove, then I'd rather focus on option B, and that is whether it is possible to acquire knowledge in an unreal reality, whether that unreal reality is a dream or a simulation. And I think it will be much easier to prove that knowledge in a simulation is in fact possible, that it is still possible to know or learn something, even if the reality in and of itself is unreal. For a moment, let's forget about the question whether their life is a simulation or a dream, and instead focus on some actual existing simulations created by human beings. If those simulations are existing, there is more credibility to their realness than to the imagined scenario of whether life is a simulation. The easiest way to access such simulation is in form of video games. And 3 particular video games I want to focus on in this video are Grand Theft Auto 4, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Assassin's Creed 3. I think that Grand Theft Auto 4 just so happened to be one of the most realistic games ever made. And sure, part of it is the gameplay mechanics. At the time of its release in 2008, Grand Theft Auto 4 had probably the most realistic driving and physics mechanics in an open-world action-adventure game at that time. And those realistic mechanics are a huge part of the reason why this game is so realistic. But you know, you could say the same about a lot of driving and racing games. Some of them have way more realistic driving mechanics. Some of them can feel pretty close to what it's actually like to drive a car, and you have certain flight simulators that are very similar to actually flying a plane. But in the case of Grand Theft Auto 4, I am not talking exclusively about the realism of the gameplay mechanics, but also the realism of the game world. The world of GTA 4 resembles that of our own. You have cars driving around, stopping at the red light and driving at the green light, mostly following the rules of the road. You have pedestrians going places, you have diners, restaurants, bars, hot dog booths, street musicians and preachers.
Yours is a life of sin. Yeah. You all evil. You seem happy, but happiness is not of this world. Happiness is of the devil.
And even Ricky Gervais telling jokes at the comedy club.
Do a lot of work for cancer. That's my chosen charity. Do a lot of work for people with cancer. And they're welcome to it. But I will say this, if I ever get cancer myself, I'm gonna walk into the nearest hospital and go, right, I paid for that machine, get that little bald fucker off it.
There is a huge amount of similarity between this simulated reality and our own reality, and yet one of them happens to be most likely real, and another is, with a high level of certainty, a simulation. The world of GTA 4 is not real. The characters, the NPCs who are living in that reality, the simulated reality, they don't have any qualitative experience. When Nico, the main character of Grand Theft Auto 4, eats a burger, which the game allows you to do through its gameplay mechanics, he doesn't really eat a burger. He doesn't really feel the taste of the burger or its texture. He doesn't swallow it down. His body is not digesting the burger. He is not eating a burger. All we get is just an animation that is supposed to make it look like he's eating, to make for a more or less realistic experience and a simulation of eating a burger. Phenomenally speaking, there is no one eating a burger in this scenario. And I know what you might be thinking. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. And you would be right, because there would be no shit either. I'm really sorry. I'm just full of bad jokes, or if you prefer it, shitty jokes. Well, imagine for a second that life as we know it is in fact a video game, and we are NPCs, non-playable characters who are occupying the space in this simulation. And we know it for a fact that when we are eating something, we are experiencing the phenomenal experience of eating and digesting food. We experience the taste, the texture, you feel it when you're swallowing it down, and depending what you ate, you might be feeling the effects of the digestion, more or less. Well, okay, so if that could be the case, then what is there to say that in this scenario I mentioned, Nico doesn't actually experience the taste of a burger? If we might just as well just be video game characters and we are experiencing such sensations, then why wouldn't he? And I'll leave that question for you to answer. Answer it however you please. I'm not going to go in depth on that because I don't really think it's of importance to the topic of this video, and besides, by trying to rationalize that, we would only be going full circle back to square one, you know, when Descartes was asking himself whether he can trust his own senses. You know, you will be going back to that very same question. Well, how can we trust our senses? And with what we've explored so far, it really isn't a good argument, and therefore I will focus on something else entirely. Despite the unreality of such a simulation in the form of video game like Grand Theft Auto 4, there are still the elements in this simulation that resemble our own reality. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2 are known for its realism, depicting wildlife and snow and water mechanics. Animals in Red Dead Redemption 2 act more similarly to their real-life counterparts than in any other game before it. The way the characters are moving in water and snow, and how the movement of snow and water reacts to their movement or pressure, resembles that of the real world. Similarly, Assassin's Creed 3 possesses the most realistic animal behavior and hunting mechanics out of all of the Assassin's Creed games. But it's bleak compared to games like Red Dead Redemption 2. The quality that games like the Assassin's Creed series possess, though, is that they have real-life historical characters and are based on and around actual historical events such as American Revolution, French Revolution, Crusades, or the Siege of Alexandria. It is safe to say that there is something true you can learn from the Assassin's Creed games, despite the games themselves and what is happening in those games is not real. The historical characters of Assassin's Creed 3 are about as real as Socrates and Plato's dialogues. That is not the real Socrates. The Socrates we are referring here is the character in or within the Plato's dialogues. By no means are you having an actual direct interaction with Socrates, or you are reading a source coming directly from Socrates. In the same sense, your interactions with Abraham Lincoln or George Washington in Assassin's Creed 3 are not direct sources coming from those men. Assassin's Creed 3 has a lot of fiction, but among all this fiction you can learn certain true things about the American Revolution, its historical and cultural context, and some opinions that some people were very likely to share.
Freedom is peace.
Oh no. It's an invitation to chaos. Only look at this little revolution your friends have started. I have stood before the Continental Congress and listened to them stamp and shout. All in the name of liberty. But it is just noise.
And this is why you favor Lee?
He understands the needs of this would-be nation far better than the jobberknolls who profess to represent it.
It seems your tongue has tasted sour grapes. The people have made their choice, And it was Washington.
People chose nothing. It was done by a group of privileged cowards seeking only to enrich themselves. They convened in private and made a decision that would benefit them. Oh, they might have dressed it up with pretty words. That does not make it true. The only difference, Connor, the only difference between myself and those you aid is that I do not feign affection.
Still, it will be foolish to assume or to think that you can learn the entire context of American Revolution from this game, or that everything that takes place in this game happens to be real or have actually happened in the past. This is not a completely historical, accurate retelling of the events surrounding American Revolution, but nor is it a 100% work of fiction. There is some truth buried deep under all the fiction, this layer of fiction on the surface. What all those three games share in common is that while being a fictitious virtual reality, there is something we can learn from those games about the external reality, the real reality existing outside of those games. Now, let me present you with a thought experiment of mine. You're giving a birth to a child. If you're not a woman, just imagine you are one, and your child is being taken away from you, and for the entirety of 20 years, your child is being locked in a blank room where the only thing they have access to is a screen, a video game console, and those three video games I mentioned earlier. The simulated reality of those video games will be the only thing your child will have access to. Everything they will learn about the world will come exclusively from those video games. That will be the only actual thing they will experience outside of the reality of this blank room they found themselves in. After 20 years, your child is being released from the blank room and you are finally able to meet them for the first time. Now, the question is, in what way will your child be able to relate to the external world and the people in it? How will he relate to you as a person? And assuming that running people over and shooting them with AK and GTA 4 hasn't turned him into a homicidal maniac, and that 20 years of social isolation hasn't affected his ability to empathize with other people, in what way will he find other people relatable? Will he perceive other people as actual persons with their own thoughts, with their own feelings and memories, all the internal processes that the observant himself possesses? Or will he see them as yet another NPC? And while providing a solid answer to that will be impossible without actually conducting the experiment, I would assume that the latter is actually very possible. Still, what I think is more important than that is whether that kid, now a man, will have any knowledge of the external reality at all by playing those video games, or will he be a tabula rasa in John Locke's terms, a blank slate? Now that he is released from the blank room, he's free to go outside and see the world for himself. Will all of it be absolutely new to him? Well, I'm thinking that there are certain elements of the world, of the reality, that will be familiar to him from playing those video games. He'll notice the sky above his head, and, well, he's seen a simulation of that sky in all of those free games. He will more or less have an understanding that the sky should be up there. He may perhaps not know the reality of what clouds and the atmosphere actually is, but he will know that the sky is supposed to be up there, not down here. The world is not upside down. He might recognize the urban environment of GTA 4 that now is being translated into the actual external reality, and he notices those elements that, you know what, it feels like a deja vu. I have seen this before, right? He even might recognize some cultural and social norms. He might notice that, hey, the car's driving around and stopping at the red light, just like in GTA 4. Although what he wouldn't learn from the game is the cultural, social phenomenon of why cars are stopping at the red light. I don't think he would possess a proper understanding of why exactly cars are stopping at the red light. You know, to allow pedestrians to pass, to have one side of the traffic moving at a time, to not cause absolute chaos. I don't think there's a valid reason to believe that he would possess such a knowledge without actual interactions with society. Instead, he will possess a purely mechanical knowledge of cars stopping at the red light. There is the what, but there is no why. Red light equals stop. In that sense, his mind would resemble that of a machine, of an AI that possesses the mechanical, logical understanding of the provided information while missing the human context. Although modern iterations of AI can be really good at simulating that human context, ChatGPT is one of the examples of an AI that possesses the possibility to simulate that human context in a really efficient way. The green environment, or how most people refer to it, the nature, and the animals, the wild animals, would probably be familiar to him from games like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Assassin's Creed 3. Although might have been quite confusing for him considering the time period those games are taking place in. After all, those games are taking place in the 19th and 18th centuries respectively. Would he possess the understanding of time periods, that things change and develop over time, that the reality of the 19th century America is not exactly the same as the reality of the 21st century America? It's getting dark. Gotta put it on the light. I'm willing to say that he would even possess the knowledge of certain physical laws relating to motion and action, but probably without knowing that he actually knows it. But then again, isn't that the case for most kids? Most children possess some understanding of the laws of gravity. Most kids will know that, well, if I drop this bottle, it will fall. A kid knows that, but the kid does not know that they know anything about the laws of gravity. On top of that, he might even know that jumping down from certain heights might result in injury or death. Although Assassin's Creed 3 is probably not the best example for that, considering that you can jump off the building and survive.
One of those people knows what became of Benjamin.
That's the level of unrealism that I think is important to take into consideration when discussing those similarities between those simulated realities and our reality. Whether he would understand what death implies, that the end of a conscious phenomenal experience, that I'm not so sure of. But I think he would possess some surface level understanding of injury and death, at least bodily death, not necessarily phenomenal death. And on some level he would even possess the knowledge of certain social structures and human interactions. For instance, in most video games there's this phenomenon of paying currency for services, whether those services include eating at a restaurant, buying health items, or buying weapons, or buying customization items, etc., etc. The same can't be said of those three aforementioned games. They all possess currency and paying for services, such as buying maps in Assassin's Creed 3. Red Dead Redemption 2 possesses a lot of dialogue that is very realistic and natural and relates a lot to people's daily lives. That's why I think he would possess some understanding of this daily human interaction, but some part of the context would be obviously lost in translation. Still, he would be able to comprehend the way people express their emotions through conversations, at least on the surface level. After all, we are social beings even when we are isolated, and it is safe to say that he was genetically predisposed to reacting to those facial expressions of people in video games as if they were people in real life, and therefore learning certain emotional expressions through those characters. While there would be a huge gaping hole in this man's knowledge, I think he would possess at least some knowledge of the external reality, some social structures, as well as perhaps even some knowledge about American Revolution, without even knowing that he possesses any knowledge about American Revolution, similarly to how a child does not know that he possesses some knowledge about gravity. And still, he would possess all that knowledge without leaving that blank room, where all he was doing was playing video games for 20 years straight, which seems like the dream of any average teenager these days. Now, the reason why this is possible is because the simulations we create in form of video games, they reflect our actual reality. Whether that actual lived reality is a simulation in and of itself or not. For example, the fictional versions of Japanese districts in the Yakuza series resembles that of the real-life counterparts, which they are based on. For example, the Dotonbori in Osaka becomes Sotenbori in the Yakuza series. This fictional district is an almost perfect copy of its real-life counterpart. In all of the films, series, fictional novels, and video games and all virtual experiences we create, we borrow from the only reality that is known to us, and that is our lived reality, the world as we know it. And in absolutely everything we create, we borrow the elements of that which is known to us. The same can be said for art, the paintings. Most of that resembles something real. Plato's saw art as an imperfect copy of nature. And even if you go really out there and create something surreal, it will still have elements of reality. Sci-fi and fantasy films, that might, the creators of those films, they could create some sort of creature that obviously doesn't exist. Still, those creatures will possess elements of actual existing creatures, actual non-human animals that we borrow elements from to create those fictitious creatures, beasts and monsters, fictional animals and so on. It's not like it's coming out of nowhere. Those fictional universes we create in our films, books, series and games, they resemble the way we use technology, really. We don't create anything technological, we don't create technological entities and devices ex nihilo, out of nowhere. Instead, we use existing materials to build something. We do not possess the power of God to create something out of nothing. This art of creation, poiesis, is true to the creation of all technological devices as well as art. And for that reason, I strongly believe that it is possible to acquire knowledge even in an unreal simulated environment. And I think that the same can be said of dreams. Our dreams are primarily based on and reflect our actual reality, our lives, as well as something we might have read about or something we have seen on the film. It's not uncommon that dreams have elements of the films we're familiar with. I mean, the amount of dreams I had that more or less resembled Jacob's ladder is absolutely insane. Still, and for that reason, I think that knowledge in a dream, acquiring some knowledge in a dream, or at least knowing something in your dream, is still a possibility. And going back to the example of a cheating partner in your dreams, I mean, you're still not any more wiser to whether your partner is having an affair, but, well, ask yourself, what do you know for certain in that dream? Well, you know who your partner is, that for once. You know you have a partner, although dreams can be quite complicated because, you know, sometimes in a dream you might be convinced that you have a partner. You might even believe that, oh my god, we've been together for like 25 years. But then you wake up and you're like, oh, I don't really have a partner. That was just a dream. And the reality be there staring at you and like, hey there, enjoy being alone. This surreal and unexpected reality of a dream is a much harder example to work with compared to human-made existing simulations, because those simulations are made with intentionality. There is an intention behind them, and there is no clear intention behind your dream and what is happening in your dream unless we're talking about lucid dreaming. And while those same elements of reality that are present in virtual simulations are still present in our dreams, it's as if someone smeared mayonnaise and tomato sauce all over this picture of reality and covered it in fog. Does that make sense? Therefore, I think it is safe to conclude that even if the reality as we know it is in fact a simulation, it is still possible to learn something, to possess some knowledge about the external reality outside of our simulation, based on some observed principles and phenomena that are taking place and existing in this simulation that we know as real life. And while it would be impossible to know with certainty exactly how much of what we think we know happens to be true and what exactly it is that we think we know that actually is true, but I can tell with a certain level of certainty that I think that it is at least possible to know something. We just not necessarily be able to know what exactly it is we know. I know something, but I don't know what it is. You know, you might be thinking, alright, fine, but the examples of the video games that you gave are specifically video games that resemble our own reality. What about the fictional worlds in fantasy games, such as The Legend of Zelda, Dragon Age, or Final Fantasy? There are things there that by no means resemble our own reality. Or what about video games with insanely unrealistic physics, such as Goat Simulator? What about the main character being shot 300 times and still living? What about a character being stabbed in the stomach and still continue fighting like it never happened? And, well, yeah, you're right. Certain elements of reality don't really translate well into fictional worlds that intentionally distort this realism to fit it for the purposes of the narrative and the reality of the fictional universe. such as magic and stuff. But, you know, this relates back to what I said about that we can know that we know something, but we may not necessarily know what it is we know. And even if our reality happened to be some supersized fantasy game, there will still be some element in that that happens to be real, because even when we make those fantasy and sci-fi fictional experiences, there are elements of reality in those. It will be much harder to have a proper grasp on which elements would be actually realistic and would relate to external reality outside of the simulation. Like, in that sense, it will be much harder to have the certainty of what reflects that external reality. But we might still be certain that there will be some element that might be relevant not only to our simulation, but also the external reality in which simulation was created. Besides, you know, if our reality is in fact a fantasy universe created in the external reality, and this fantasy universe we live in is equivalent to what we perceive as fantasy, and, you know, cases like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Final Fantasy, and our reality would be equivalent to that, then it is safe to say that the external reality must be really fucking mundane if this life is being seen as an exciting fantasy adventure. Imagine this. The life of a 70-year-old grandma going to the grocery store to buy potatoes and eggs being equivalent to Frodo traveling to Mordor to destroy the ring. Well, that is something. I mean, what does your life consist of exactly? Staring at a white wall? Eating tasteless aspic with nothing in it, just that bland, tasteless aspic and white wall? Then I guess this life would be quite a fantasy. Yo, if that's the case, I feel sorry for you, to be honest. I'd rather stay in the simulation, you know. I mean, you know, obviously I am exaggerating, right? I mean, even in the fictional universes like Lord of the Rings or Dragon Age, you have characters who are NPCs, just filling up the space there, but who are people who are going about their daily lives, you know? I mean, you know, the hobbits in the Tolkien's fictional universe, they don't exactly live exciting lives, you know? All they do is sit around all day gardening, they planting the plants and smoking the plants and eating. Of course, they get munches. But, you know, on top of that, in all of those fictional fantasy universes, you have those intrigues going on the higher level there, right? And the same can be said of our world. You know, you have those intrigues, you have the world of politics, the conflict, the war. You know, that's where it's actually at. We are just NPCs filling up that world. Although, actually, I prefer to think of ourselves as spices. We are spicing up that world, if you think about it, with everything we do. Just imagine playing a video game that just is not populated by anyone. You just have the goal to get somewhere, to achieve the task, some challenge, maybe to kill someone. But there are no people along the way. You're just traveling through a wasteland. And I think I just described Death Stranding. The game feels empty, right? And we are not just a filler. We are the spices of this reality. The life of a average normal citizen, right? We are way more important than people like to think. We matter. We are what gives this life a taste. A matter holding her baby, two friends playing pool, two partners or three or four holding hands and so on. You know, an artist painting their painting, a musician playing the guitar or piano or whatever. You know, that's where the beauty is at. You know, forget those intrigues, the politics and war. That's where the beauty of this life is really at. And I know I'm going off topic there, so I'm really sorry about that. But I still stand firmly by what I said. Without us, this reality would be like a dish without any seasoning. What I have to say now is that I came to the conclusion that it really is irrelevant whether the reality is a simulation or not. Because irregardless of that, I still am certain that I can know something, but I can't know everything. And if life is not a simulation, that's still the case. I know something, but I don't always know exactly what I know with certainty, you know, and things we think we know might change over time. The scientific knowledge we possess might be wrong, might be disproven in the future. So, is it really that different? I don't really think so. What we have access to is the possibility of knowledge. I'm certain that knowledge is possible. You know, I'm not taking the position of the Greek skeptics. I don't question whether it is possible to have knowledge. What intrigues me instead is the distinction between the possibility of knowledge and the actuality of it. You know, the difference between having the possibility to know something and actually knowing something. Imagine if there was a type of knowledge that was universal. A universal knowledge that would apply to the reality, whether it was real or a simulation. And in this case, I think we can get some help from modality. Modality meaning relationship to the truth or to reality, saying that, you know, something can be possible, likely, essential, necessary, actual, as in actually being true, or even logically plausible. And since we're on the topic of modality, I have to mention possible worlds. And what I mean by possible worlds are not exactly what we think of as alternative universes in popular science or fiction media. You know, it has nothing to do with this idea that if I travel to the past and like do something there, this will create an alternative universe with a different timeline, or this idea of a multiverse that you've seen those superhero comic books like Marvel. You know, like there's this one universe with this Clark Kent who's Superman, and then there's the alternative universe in which Clark Kent is gay. No, nothing like that. What I'm talking about is the philosophical concept of possible worlds. Those possible worlds are by no means placed in and existing in a space-time, but rather they're just concepts. Imagine if there is a possibility, imagine a possible world in which that is the case, right? Imagine, well, there's a possibility the grass is purple. We can talk about it. So if you give me a statement that, well, grass is green, this will not be the case if you can say, well, it would be possible that a grass could be purple. In that sense, the statement grass is green is not a universal truth. That would be the case in every single situation. And you know, you don't even have to go that far. Grass gets yellowish when it's dry, right? Or it can be black when it's burnt. You don't really have to go that far, but this is just an example. Another example of a possible world, you know, water, or how we commonly describe its chemical structure as H2O. Now imagine the possibility that someone would describe the chemical structure of water molecules as XYZ. Now, that is a possible world where that could be the case, and therefore it is not a universal truth that the chemical structure of water molecules is H2O, because it is possible that it could not be so. And at this point, you know, you might be thinking, well, okay, this is just a stupid statement which we can use to negate absolutely everything. If you just say, well, it is possible that it could not be so. In that case, you know, saying that the World War ended in 1945, it's not a universal statement because, well, it is possible that it wouldn't have ended that year. There's an interesting novel by Philip K. Dick about this concept, you know, the alternative history in which Germany won World War II and how this post-war society looks like. Good read, I recommend the book, but this is not necessarily where I was going to. What are universal truths? The sort of truths that would be true in any case, in any possibility, in any possible world. So what I would call a universal truth is this example. If there is an object X and there is an object Y, then either one of them is larger than the other, or they're the same size. So either X is bigger than Y, Y is bigger than X, or X and Y are equivalent when it comes to their size. Okay, so let's imagine you want to say here that, you know what, you disagree with me, and you can easily deny this statement by simply saying, well, imagine the possibility that size doesn't exist. And you might be thinking, ha, gotcha. Not necessarily. Here's the thing. If size, at least, you know, when we're thinking of Aristotelian categories, and I think they're fundamental for metaphysics in general, right? In Aristotelian categories, size is not a substance in and of itself, something that exists independently. Rather, size exists in substance, in a specific object. You know, an object has a form, shape, substance, color, exists in time and space and all of that, right? Size cannot exist without a specific object that possesses the quality of having a size. So by claiming that, imagine a possible world in which size does not exist, what that implies is that you're also claiming that no objects exist in that sort of universe where there is no size. And you know, the problem with that is, well, my statement was that if objects X and Y exist, then one is either bigger than the other or they're the same size. So by saying that there is no size, or saying there are no objects, and that already disproves your statement, because my statement clearly states if those objects exist, assuming they exist. And if they do exist, they have a size. You know, I think this is one example of a universal truth, as well as something like, well, X, if an object X with X properties would be equivalent to itself, to X with X properties, right? Like, I am equivalent to myself when it comes to my size, shape, form, my thoughts, my appearance, my age and everything, because, you know, I am myself. I'm not some copy of myself. Although I don't think this would be the case when it comes to cloning. Clones will not be necessarily identical copies despite sharing the same DNA. You know, let's say my clone loses his arm. He's not equivalent to me. Will he have the same phenomenal experiences, memories as me? Probably not, so there might be differences in personality, but I am identical to myself. And I'm thinking, you know those funny mirrors in amusement parks that distort your proportions, so you appear in a funny way, you know, you're shorter, thinner, fatter, or your face is all wobbly. The thing about those mirrors is that the reflections in those mirrors, that's not you. Only you are you. In the same sense, I will not be identical to a picture, a video of me from 10 years ago, obviously, or 20, and so on. And even 50 years from now, I will not be identical to Alexander from this video. In that sense, this video is sort of a historical artifact, you know? And really, when you think about it, those universal truths, at its core, they're mathematical. Mathematical truths are, or at least most of them, are universal truths. A mathematical truth that how many fingers do you have? Well, that will not be a universal truth, because it is a possibility that I will lose some of my fingers in the future, that I will no longer have those fingers. Or imagine a possible world in which people have 7 fingers on each hand. Aha! But there are those mathematical truths which relate to size or motion that can be considered more or less universal. Therefore, I think it is one of the most universally true statements that will not be dependent on situational context and would be true in every single instance where at least 2 objects exist. And therefore, you could think of mathematical knowledge as a superior knowledge, to be honest. And it makes perfect sense, considering both an actual reality and simulations are really built around mathematics. And oh my, that was a long one. So thank you so much for watching, and I just realized this is the first video in a long time where I didn't start with greetings and salutations. Wow, I guess I did it now. So it's done, said and done. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.